Dear friends, welcome to another episode in the fantastic military world. In this video, we'll talk about the election of Alexander Stubb to the presidency of Finland, a politician publicly anti-Putin, who was elected with the promise of not engaging in dialogue with Russia until the end of the invasion of Ukraine. On this Sunday, February 11th, Finland elected Alexander Stubb as the president of the country in a highly contested election, with Stubb winning with 51.6% of the votes, while his opponent, Pekka Haavisto, achieved 48.4% of the votes. It was the first presidential election after the country's entry into NATO, with the alliance and other related topics, such as Putin's Russia and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, dominating the campaign and debates. Alexander Stubb is a well-known figure in the Finnish political scene, having served as Prime Minister from June 2014 to May 2015, and as the important Minister of Finance from May 2015 to June 2016. During the campaign, Stubb adopted a tough stance towards Russia, as evident in his victory speech, where he guaranteed that there would be no contact or communication with Putin and the Russian government while the invasion of Ukraine was ongoing. After Finland's entry into NATO, Russia began strong pressure against the country, launching thousands of illegal immigrants from as far away as Iraq and even Somalia against the Finnish borders. This artificial migratory flow forced Finland to close all border posts with Russia in December 2023. For Finland, this is what is commonly referred to as hybrid warfare, with Putin doing to Finland what Lukashenko has been doing to Poland for many years, launching thousands of immigrants against an adversary country, with the aim of pressuring and collapsing its social services. Stubb not only approved the decision of the previous president, but also promised to keep the border passages with Russia closed indefinitely. During his campaign regarding Finland's entry into the alliance, he said that for decades his country had been preparing for Russia, and that now they are finally ready. But why do the Finns perceive Russia in this way to the point of electing a politician who claims to be 100% anti-Putin? Finland and Russia have always had a very tumultuous relationship throughout history. Until the 19th century, Finland was part of the Swedish Empire, an empire that, at its height in the 17th century, was one of the largest and most powerful in Europe. However, in the early 19th century, after Sweden was defeated by Tsarist Russia, Finland passed into Russian control, giving rise in 1809 to the so-called Grand Duchy of Finland. During the period of Russian control, the Finns, despite enjoying some autonomy, were vassals of the Russian Empire, obliged to compulsory contributions that even involved men to fight in the Tsar's wars. It was obviously a very unpleasant situation, and so in 1917, with Russia plunged into chaos in the context of the Bolshevik Revolution, the Finns seized the opportunity and declared independence. Although Lenin recognized Finnish independence, some border issues were not fully resolved, with Stalin using this excuse to attack Finland on November 30th, 1939, in what would become known as the Winter War. After the quick German victory over Poland in September of that year, Stalin wanted to show the world that he too was capable of achieving easy victories, launching over 400,000 soldiers against the Finnish army, which at that time had no more than 120,000 men. Despite the gigantic numerical and technological superiority, with the Russians employing thousands of armored vehicles and planes while the Finns had no armored vehicles, fighting on skis and sleds pulled by reindeer, the first Soviet wave was totally massacred by the Finns, with Stalin being forced to send more and more men into an authentic meat grinder. By March 1940, after 3 months of war, Stalin had already sent more than 750,000 men against the Finns, losing more than half, with 388,000 Soviet soldiers killed or wounded. However, isolated and without international support, Finland was forced to surrender, ceding to Stalin some territories in the south, in the Leningrad region. Little over 2 years later, in June 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa, Finland saw this as an opportunity to regain control of the regions lost to Stalin, starting on June 25th of that year, the so-called Continuation War. But despite a very strong initial advance that gave back to the Finns the control over the lost regions in 1940, In 1944, the Germans were expelled from the Soviet Union, forcing Finland in September of that year to sign an armistice with Stalin and to declare war against Germany, with the Finns expelling 250,000 German soldiers who were firmly entrenched in their territory. When World War II ended, Stalin, well aware of the combative spirit of the Finns, acted prudently, offering Finland total internal autonomy as long as it remained neutral in the Cold War, and that was indeed what happened. Finland, in stark contrast to other countries where the Soviet Union entered, like Poland, managed to remain free from Soviet influence, with the Finns refusing several times to join NATO. This only changed after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Before that invasion, opinion polls clearly showed that the Finns did not want to join NATO, but as soon as Putin invaded Ukraine, public opinion changed radically, with the majority of Finnish society supporting the country's entry into the alliance. For the Finns and their Swedish neighbors, if Putin had invaded Ukraine with shoddy excuses, Finland, which shares a 1,350-kilometer border with Russia, could also be invaded, with this having been decisive for the Finns to decide to abandon their non-alignment policy initiated in 1945. For decades, the Finns have always been well aware that Russia could attack at any moment, thus completely shaping Finnish military doctrine, built on the premise that if there is a war, that war will come from Russia. This mentality shaped several generations of Finns, as was the case with the elected president Alexander Stubb. Stubb's grandparents fought against the Soviets in the 1930s and 40s, and he and his parents lived haunted during the Cold War by the specter of a possible new Soviet invasion. Therefore, now in 2024, after Putin has shown his true face and his real expansionist ambitions, Finland is doing its part to protect its sovereignty and freedom from Russia, with the election of Alexander Stubb, a politician who declares himself to be 100% anti-Putin, clearly demonstrating Finnish commitment to this. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe and activate the notification bell to not miss any news, criticisms, ideas, or suggestions. You can leave them in the comments.